Now, Ed Dowd has worked on Wall Street most of his career, spanning both credit markets and equity markets. Some of the firms he worked for include HSBC and most notably BlackRock, where as a portfolio manager, he managed to grow a $2 billion portfolio into a $14 billion growth equity portfolio over 10 years. Ed's expertise is analysing data and predicting financial trends. He's currently visiting Australia, where he's on a speaking tour promoting his book, Cause Unknown, The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022. That sounds fascinating. We'll get onto that in a minute with Ed. But first, Ed, welcome to Australia. Welcome here. You're in Perth. Thank you for chatting to us here on Outsiders. Let's get straight into it. You believe that the politicians and central bankers have actually broken the monetary system and we are at the end of a current monetary cycle, and that you say we are in a fraud cycle. Tell us about it, Ed.
Yeah, so we believe at Finance Technologies, where I'm a founding partner, that the current monetary system has been undergoing an end game. And we're seeing now an unraveling of the global monetary system that needs to be replaced. It's going to be a Bretton Woods III type of situation like we had after World War II and in the 70s with the going off the gold standard. So what do we see now? We saw great inflation after the COVID fiasco in the US and around the globe, where politicians and central bankers printed unprecedented amounts of money. Printing money is actually debt creation. And we saw inflation when that money supply went up. And now the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 500 basis points in 13 months, one of the most accelerated interest rate hike cycles in the history of the Fed. They've taken away the punch bowl, and liquidity, global liquidity, is on the wane. M2, which is the money supply as measured by the Federal Reserve, has gone negative year-over-year growth in November of 22 for the first time since 1930. And this is a serious situation. So we see, instead of inflation, that is in the rearview mirror. We're predicting deflation in the first quarter of 2024, and we're looking at a U.S. recession along the lines of the S&L crisis in the 1990s in Q3 and Q4. So the economic indicators we follow are declining rapidly. We've already seen bank failures in the U.S., and we're going to see huge economic pain in the U.S., which unfortunately will spread across the globe.
James.
So, Ed, you talk about kind of a Bretton Woods 3.0 type arrangement. I've been watching that money supply number with great interest as well. What comes next, and how much of what comes next is some sort of new digital payments, digital currency type system, which unhooks people from their earnings and their wealth in ways that maybe we aren't fully cognizant of?
Yeah, so we're predicting in this next economic crisis that quote-unquote serious individuals will start floating the idea of the central bank digital currency. It'll be discussed as a way to get us out of this crisis. And they'll also, we think, potentially tie it in the U.S. to a universal basic income. So there'll be, the stick and the carrot. And this must be, in my humble opinion, avoided. The central bank digital currency, unfortunately, gives too much power and control to technocrats and bureaucrats. It's the ability to tax tax all sorts of activities in your life. It's the technocrats' dream mechanism, because you'll be able to digitize the currency. It'll be connected to your credit card. You'll be able to monitor almost everything you do. So it's another step towards lack of freedom.
It's the Great Reset.
Would it be like a social credit system then, in a sense, like a Chinese social credit system?
Well, that is the fear, is that they'll tie it to that. And if you're not, touting the current narrative of the establishment, and you're quote unquote what they call dissident and/or terrorist, because that's the terminology they use now if you don't agree with them, they'll shut off your bank account, and that can be done.
And we saw that with the Canadian truckers, where they used that very effectively. Now, we've seen corporates embrace this leftist virtue signalling through ESG and DEI policies. Let's have a listen to your old boss at BlackRock.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you. Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
It's an investment criteria and they're forcing behaviours. Tell us about that phenomenon where companies are being forced into adopting these policies, these backward, I would say, destructive policies. Otherwise, they can't play the game.
Yeah, ESG had noble intentions when it started. You know, it was, environmental, social, and governance, and it had noble intentions, but unfortunately it's turned into a way to control and set agendas that may not necessarily agree with the people whose money is invested with these firms. And Larry Fink, I don't think he's an evil cabal man. I think he's a businessman, and when it comes down to it, ESG is a way to get higher fees. So in my humble opinion, it's a fee scheme, and they're going to make more money. What's alarming is the concentration of power in firms like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, which control through their agents managing other people's money. And the problem is, in the old days, as a portfolio manager, I would vote my shares in my portfolio for the annual vote for the board of directors. That's now in the hands of an elite group at the top of these firms. So it's Charlie Munger of Warren Buffett partner fame has written an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that this needs to be investigated. There's too much power in too few hands. So whenever there's too much power in too few hands, strange things happen, like forcing of behaviors.
Now, Ed, just quickly before we go on to your book, you say that the GFC, the global financial crisis, never went away. How do people protect themselves? And you're predicting that's going to lead to this recession. How do people protect themselves?
Well, I don't like to give personal financial advice, but what I have been saying for the better part of a year is cash in a deflationary period is a good position. So I've been recommending people look at their portfolios and raise a certain amount of cash and invest in what I call very safe securities like government money market funds and or 3-month Treasury bills. You can go to Treasury Direct. It's a website in the U.S. and invest with the U.S. government and roll those T-bills every 3 months. It's currently paying about 5%. So you're getting paid 5% to avoid the storm, which will affect most financial assets.